So I found this article here from the Daily Paul, and this is on why Iceland should be in the news, but it's not. An Italian radio program story about Iceland's ongoing revolution is a stunning example of how little our media tells us about the rest of the world. Americans may remember that at the start of the 2008 financial crisis, Iceland literally went bankrupt. The reasons were mentioned only in passing, and since then, this little-known member of the European Union fell back into oblivion. Elder Scrolls. As one European country after another fails or risks failing, imperiling the euro, with repercussions for the entire world, the last thing the powers that be want is for Iceland to become an example. And here's why. 5 years of pure neoliberal regime had made Iceland, of only 320,000 with no army, oh my god, how come terrorists don't attack them? They don't have an army. Just kidding. One of the richest countries in the world. In 2000, yeah, you heard me right. They became one of the richest countries in the world with only 320,000 people. In 2003, all the country's banks were privatized. In an effort to attract foreign investors, they offered online banking whose minimal costs allowed them to offer relatively high rates of return. The accounts, called IceSave, attracted many English and Dutch small investors. But as investments grew, so did the bank's foreign debt. In 2003, Iceland's debt was equal to 200 times its gross as a national product, GNP. But in 2007, it was 900%. The 2008 world financial crisis was the coup de grace. The three main Icelandic banks, I'm not going to say their names, went belly up and were nationalized, while the kroner lost 85% of its value with respect to the euro. At the end of the year, Iceland declared bankruptcy. Contrary to what could be expected, the crisis resulted in Icelanders recovering their sovereign rights through a process of direct participatory democracy that eventually led to a new constitution, but only after much pain. Geir Haarde, the prime minister of a social democratic coalition government, negotiated a $2,100,000 loan, to which the Nordic countries added another $2.5 million. But the foreign financial community pressured Iceland to impose drastic measures. The FMI and the European Union wanted to take over its debt, claiming this was the only way for the country to pay back Holland and Great Britain, who had promised to reimburse their citizens. Protests and riots continued, eventually forcing the government to resign. Elections were brought forward to April 2009, resulting in a left-wing coalition which condemned the neoliberal economic system, but immediately gave in to its demands that Iceland pay off a total of 3.5 million euros. This actually required each citizen to pay 100 euros a month for 15 years at 5.5 interest to pay off a debt incurred by private parties vis-a-vis other private banks or private parties, banks. It was the straw that broke the reindeer's back. What happened next was extraordinary. The belief that citizens had to pay for the mistakes of a financial monopoly, that an entire nation must be taxed to pay off private debts, was shattered, transforming the relationship between citizens and their political institutions and eventually driving Iceland's leaders to the side of their constituents. The head of state refused to ratify the law that would have made Iceland's citizens responsible for its bankers' debts, and accepted calls for referendum. Of course, the international community only increased the pressure on Iceland. Great Britain and Holland threatened dire reprisals that would isolate the country. As Icelanders went to vote, foreign bankers threatened to block any aid from the IMF. The British government threatened to freeze Icelanders' savings and checking accounts. As the leader guy said, "We were told that if we refused the international community's conditions, we would become the Cuba of the North. But if we had accepted, we would have become Haiti." Now, in the March 2010 referendum, 93% voted against repayment of the debt. The IMF immediately froze its loan. But the revolution, though not televised in the U.S., would not be intimidated. With the support of a furious citizenry, the government launched civil and penal investigations into those responsible for the financial crisis. Interpol put out an international arrest warrant for ex-president of one of their banks implicated in the crisis. Now, I'm running out of time here. But Icelanders didn't stop there. They decided to draft a new constitution that would free the country from the exaggerated power of international finance. Boom.